I see, and that would have done it for me. I think Colossus and Super Mega Sonic Teenage Warhead or whatever, that just didn't speak to me. Like neither one of them resemble to me what Deadpool is. Like they're Super Megasonic is honestly, as far as I'm concerned, a really lame character.
Do you know that they went off and had to do a trade with Marvel, which I think might be part of the reason why the Marvel was able to get the rights to the character of the Living Planet. So they the only reason for it is they wanted the character because they wanted the character strictly on the name alone. The actual powers that she has in the movie compared to in the comic books are nowhere near the same apparently. But I mean, again, limited budget. What they did, and that I think was always marvels me. When you can go off and they slash your budget, and you still go off and you bring out a kick-ass movie and make no excuses for it. And
Touche.
And so I'm gonna this movie easily on my top, number 2 on my list, number 3 on my list, and I'm kind of just going straight over it. I'm gonna go Doctor Strange. Again, they stuck pretty close to the source material. Benedict Cumberbatch, who I can honestly say is probably one of my favorite actors, just purely off of the Sherlock series on the BBC, which I absolutely adore, and can't wait until it come out with a final start, showing episodes from season 4 here in North America. I'm drooling over that. I'm a bit of a Sherlock Holmes fan, so Benedict Cumberbatch to me is the ultimate Sherlock Holmes. But I mean, I'm biased. What can I say? And he was absolutely perfect in this, and he actually managed to pull off a really good American accent in here. I think that that was something he kind of did a Boston accent in that movie he did with Johnny Depp last year, but it just didn't work for me. I can't remember it now. That's
Not worthy of mention.
not worthy of mentioning it. I'm just looking actually over your list, and you have like Star Trek Beyond at number 9. That one I haven't even seen, which amazes me. I'm gonna put Suicide Squad as number 4, and again, it's not because I mean I could say Jared Leto sucks. Jared Leto sucks, but I mean the movie otherwise was really good. It reminded me why I used to love Will Smith so much. I mean, Will Smith turned down doing the Independence Day movie or sequel to come back and to do this movie.
Which ironically did not make my list.
And honestly, I'll bring it up later on. But to me, it definitely was the wiser choice.
Absolutely.
But again, it was a great story. One of the things I loved was you didn't know who the villain of this was. Because, I mean, they're all villains, and you going into this, and if just based off the trailers, you think, oh, it's going to be the Joker is the villain here. And, I mean, for him to have been on the movie, so little, and again, I mean, when the movie first came out and we talked about it, I kind of pooped all over it because I hated the way they portrayed his relationship with Harley Quinn. They kind of made it sound like these guys were absolutely crazy in love, and the relationship was as perfect as two psychopaths can possibly be. When that's can't be further from the truth. And I get they wanted it; they didn't want to go off and kind of bring up the darker side of this relationship because that would take away from the story they were trying to tell. But I couldn't get around Jared Leto as the Joker, and it just absolutely drove me crazy. And thankfully, it doesn't sound like we'll ever see him again in that role because he was apparently pretty pissed off at how little time he actually had on screen. When I honestly think he was probably on the screen too much.
Yes.
And perhaps if he had been on screen a little less, he might have made it higher on my list.
Quite possible.
Quite possibly. Number 5 on my list. I'm going to go off, and I'm going to go kind of against the grain for myself. I usually, am very much into the comic book, science fiction movies. I'm going to go with Finding Dory, and maybe this is the dad in me. I managed to take my son to go off and see this movie when it came to one of the cheap theaters. I sat there and I watched it, and again, I've mentioned how I go off and I've dabbled in writing, and I've written books on writing. And so going up and watching this, I kind of was looking at the themes and kind of where I knew things that happened in there where I knew that they were going to revisit that later on. And there's a scene where they go off and Dory's parents go off and make a path of shells so Dory can always find her way home. And that near the end of the movie where she finds herself lost in the reeds and literally comes across path after path after path of shells, all leading to where her parents are now living. And I just thought that was so epic, and I didn't think that I could ever shed a tear on for Finding Dory, because I have to say that I liked Finding Nemo, but I could honestly say I think the Finding Dory may have been an even better story.
I think one of the reasons why was because we waited so long for it. Ever since we were a kid, they kept saying, we want to make a Finding Dory. We want to make a Finding Dory.
And this was really Ellen DeGeneres who went off and kind of, she kept bringing this up, time and time again on her talk show, which kind of, led Pixar to finally says, okay, well, you know what? Let's make sure we have a good story in this. And the wonderful thing about Pixar is that they rarely ever miss when they go off and they, produce something. The stories are really top notch. That's why they're winning multiple awards, when their movies come out. And so this was just another clear example of just how good Pixar is, how good their writing team is, how good their animation team is. It was just absolutely epic.
Yeah, and I kind of want to do a few, honorable mentions, so to speak, of different movies that came out this year. Jungle Book, Captain America: Civil War.
That was another good one, yeah.
The Little Prince was a very, very good, feel-good movie that I kind of enjoyed. Star Trek Beyond, which we already touched on. And Kubo and the Two Strings, which was kind of a stop-motion movie, which was really, really, good. It had a little bit of magic in there. And according to the Rotten Tomatoes, they released their top 100 movies of 2016. We're going to go with the top 10.
Top 10. Okay.
Some of them I'm kind of surprised on. Some of them I've never even seen. So number 1, Zootopia. To me, that's a big shock.
That was actually a really good movie. That was actually a toss-up for me, which of those two animated movies to mention. Because, again, I saw Zootopia. I've seen it a couple of times now.
I've seen it about 5 or 6 times now. It's always good. I'd probably watch it again tonight before I go to bed. But then you got Hell or High Water, Arrival, Moonlight. Number 5 is Jungle Book. Then you got Love and Friendship. Finding Dory is number 7. Kubo and the Two Strings is number 8. Manchester by the Sea is number 9. And Captain America: Civil War rounded off the top 10. Okay. So it's kind of weird where you have a lot of animated movies will actually rank higher than Civil War.
Yeah, well, yeah, and again, I think they're going based off of critic reviews, I think, more than anything else. And maybe how well they've done in the theaters as well. For me, I don't know. I'm not sure I completely agree with that list necessarily. But again, we've never, said that we're, movie critics here.
Absolutely not.
You sort of, treat yourself a little bit more seriously when it comes to critiquing movies than I do. But I've never went off and ever accused myself of being a journalist of any sort or nature, and I definitely do not come across on the air when we're on here as being a critic in any such way. I will. I'm just gonna go from there. I'm gonna go. I was gonna say make a list of movies that I didn't necessarily I consider to be the worst, but maybe I'm gonna say the biggest disappointments. A movie that I actually enjoyed And my honorable mention is going to be X-Men: Age of Apocalypse. And I'm going to go off. I'm just putting that out there because it wasn't necessarily the best movie, but I mean it was definitely better than a couple of the other X-Men movies that we've went off and seen. And for me, I saw that movie the day after that the first movie on my list of movies that just were underwhelming. And that the first movie that was underwhelming for me was Alice Through the Looking Glass. It's very rare that I go off and see a movie that I consider to be in the genre I love, and I walked away and said, "What the heck is this piece of garbage?"
I actually have 4 movies that are in my list of disappointments that could have done that may or may not have been one step away from doing something great. X-Men Apocalypse is definitely one of them, as is Captain America Civil War. I believe that they didn't quite do enough, in my eyes, to make it there.
Problem with Captain America Civil War is the fact that how the hell are you going to go up and to have a decent movie about a civil war when about 75% of the characters are unusable to you because they're owned by either Fox or Sony.
Oh, I acknowledge that fact. My biggest issue with it was the incorporation of Spider-Man. I feel that the personality of this specific Spider-Man was not fit in this type of movie.
And I think one of the reasons why, I mean, I love Tom Hardy's interpretation of Spider-Man. I've always stated that one of the things I hated about Tobey Maguire when he played Spider-Man is he took the role too serious, too dark, and I loved Andrew Garfield in that part. I know there's some backlash, from fans against Garfield. I don't understand because honestly, if you were to have taken Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, put it in to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, it would have been a better trilogy. And that's just my personal opinion. I know a lot of people are not going to agree with me.
Touché.
And I mean, so in my personal opinion, just from what I've seen for Spider-Man Homecoming and from his appearance in Civil War, he's already a better Spider-Man in my mind than Tobey Maguire was. So I actually think that he was good in this story, and considering the story that they went with, it worked. There were so many things about that story that I really liked. I liked the fact that we saw Ant-Man actually, grow, turn into Giant Man, if you will. I loved, that we saw, friendships divided. I mean,
but
it was
is that movie worthy of a top 10 rating?
For me, I mean, if I was going to do a top 10 easily, I mean, we're talking about a movie that, I mean, you had it, I think, on your list as like number 6. And that's probably where it would have. No, you had it.
I had number 8.
You had it number 8. It would have been about number 6 or number 7 on my list if I went that far. So I wouldn't necessarily go off and say it was a disappointment. X-Men Apocalypse. I mean, to me, kind of a slight disappointment. I'm not sure how I would have to say that they could have made the movie better. I gotta say this. I still didn't like the way that the character of Apocalypse was physically portrayed in this movie. It really looked like a character out of one of the old Power Rangers, TV shows. Probably Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to be exact. But I mean, again, I saw, when I went up and compared to Alice Through the Looking Glass, it wasn't a disappointment. And who knows, if I'd waited a week to see it, maybe my opinion on the movie would be worse. And I haven't went back to see the movie since.
So I got Apocalypse, I've got Civil War, and to round up my top, my 4 possible disappointments of 2016 is Ghostbusters.